They gashed their bodies with knives to bespatter the altar and tree with their blood. And the novices, in imitation of the god whose death and resurrection they were celebrating, castrated themselves and swooned. 52. Attises is the sacrifice that King Minos refused when he withheld the bull from Poseidon. As Fraser has shown, ritual regicide was a general tradition in the ancient world. In southern India, he writes, the king's reign and life terminated with the revolution of the planet Jupiter round the sun. In Greece, on the other hand, the king's fate seems to have hung in the balance at the end of every 8 years. Without being unduly rash, we may surmise that the tribute of 7 youths and 7 maidens whom the Athenians were bound to send to Minos every 8 years had some connection with the renewal of the king's power for another octennial cycle. 53. The bull sacrifice required of King Minos implied that he would sacrifice himself, according to the pattern of the inherited tradition, at the close of his 8-year term. But he seems to have offered, instead, the substitute of the Athenian youths and maidens. That perhaps is how the divine Minos became the monster Minotaur, the self-annihilate king, the tyrant Holdfast, and the hieratic state, wherein every man enacts his role, the merchant empire, wherein each is out for himself. Such practices of substitution seem to have become general throughout the antique world toward the close of the great period of the early hieratic states, during the 3rd and 2nd millennia B.C. And in the same spirit, the king of the South Indian province of Keelakere, at the completion of the 12th year of his reign, on a day of solemn festival, had a wooden scaffolding constructed, and spread over with hangings of silk. When he had ritually bathed in a tank, with great ceremonies and to the sound of music, he then came to the temple, where he did worship before the divinity. Thereafter, he mounted the scaffolding and, before the people, took some very sharp knives and began to cut off his own nose, and then his ears, and his lips, and all his members, and as much of his flesh as he was able. He threw it away and round about, until so much of his blood was spilled that he began to faint, whereupon he summarily cut his throat. 54. Figure 20. The return of Jason, red figure Calyx, Etruscan, Italy, circa 470 B.C. Footnotes. Asterisk see Freud. Castration complex. Asterisk the serpent, in mythology a symbol of the terrestrial waters, corresponds precisely to Daphne's father, the river Peneus. Asterisk pollen is a symbol of spiritual energy among the American Indians of the Southwest. It is used profusely in all ceremonials, both to drive evil away and to mark out the symbolical path of life. Asterisk the well is symbolical of the unconscious. Compare that of the fairy story of the Frog King, pp. 41-42. Asterisk an Ifrit, Ifrita, is a powerful jinni, jinnaya. The Marids are a particularly powerful and dangerous class of jinn. Asterisk in Alexandrian times Pan was identified with the Ithyphallic Egyptian divinity Min, who was, among other things, the guardian of desert roads. Asterisk compare Dionysus, the great Thracian counterpart of Pan. Asterisk the watchman symbolizes, according to Wilhelm Steckel, consciousness, or, if one prefers, the aggregate of all the morality and restrictions present in consciousness. Freud, continues Dr. Steckel, would describe the watchman as the superego. But he is really only an interego. Consciousness prevents the breaking through of dangerous wishes and immoral actions. This is the sense in which watchmen, police officials and officers in dreams are in general to be interpreted. Wilhelm Steckel, Fortschritt und Technik der Traumdeutung, Wien Leipzig Bern. Verlag für Medizin, Weidmann und C. 1935, pp. 37-38. Asterisk an amphibious sea snake marked with bands of dark and light color, always more or less dreaded whenever it is seen. Asterisk it has been pointed out that this adventure of Prince Five Weapons is the earliest known example of the celebrated and well-nigh universal tar baby story of popular folklore. C. Aurelio M. Espinosa. Notes on the Origin and History of the Tar Baby Story, Journal of American Folklore, 43, 1930, 129-209. A new classification of the fundamental elements of the tar baby story on the basis of 267 versions, Journal of American Folklore, 56, 1943, 31-37, and Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, A Note on the Stick-Fast Motif, Journal of American Folklore, 57, 1944, 128-131. Asterisk the sarcophagus or casket is an alternative for the belly of the whale. Compare Moses in the Bulrushes. Endnotes. 1. Grimm's Fairy Tales, No. 1, The Frog King. 2. The Psychopathology of Everyday Life, Standard Edition, v. Orig. 1901. 3. Evelyn Underhill, Mysticism, A Study in the Nature and Development of Man's Spiritual Consciousness, New York. E. P. Dutton and Company, 1911. Part 2, The Mystic Way, Chapter 2, The Awakening of the Self. 4. Sigmund Freud, Introductory Lectures on Psychoanalysis, translated by James Strachey, Standard Edition, 16. London. Hogarth Press, 1963, pp. 396-97, Orig. 1916-17. 5. Mallory, La Morte d'Arthur, I, page she. This pursuit of the heart and view of the questing beast marks the beginning of the mysteries associated with the quest of the Holy Grail. 6. George A. Dorsey and Alfred L. Kroeber, Traditions of the Arapaho, Chicago, Field Columbia Museum, Publication 81, Anthropological Series, Volume V. 1903, page 300. Reprinted in Stith Thompson's Tales of the North American Indians, Cambridge, Massachusetts, 1929, page 128. 7. C. G. Jung, Psychology and Alchemy, Collected Works, Volume 12, New York and London, 1953, Pars. 71-73. A Ridge, 1935. 8. Wilhelm Steckel, Die Sprache des Traumas, Wiesbaden. Verlag von J. F. Bergman, 1911, page 352. Dr. Steckel points out the relationship of the blood-red glow to the thought of the blood coughed up in consumption. 9. Reprinted by permission of the publishers from Henry Clark Warren, Buddhism in Translations, Harvard Oriental Series 3, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard University Press, 1896, pp. 56-57. 10. Proverbs, 1, 24-27, 32. 11. Spiritual books occasionally quote this Latin saying which has terrified more than one soul. Ernest Dimnet, The Art of Thinking, New York. Simon & Schuster, Inc., 1929, pp. 203-4. 12. Francis Thompson, The Hound of Heaven, Portland, Maine. Thomas B. Mosier, 1908, opening lines. 13. Ibid, Conclusion. 14. Ovid, Metamorphoses, ILL. 504-553, translation by Frank Justice Miller, The Loeb Classical Library. 15. See above. 16. Jung, Psychology and Alchemy, Pars. 58-62. 17. Grimm's Fairy Tales, No. 50. 18. The Thousand Nights and One Night, Richard F. Burton translation, Bombay, 1885, Volume I, pp. 164-67. 19. Genesis, 1926. 20. Werner's Iris, Ahasverus, Der Ewige Jude, Stoff und Motivgeschichte der deutschen Literatur 6, Berlin and Leipzig, 1930, page 1. 21. See above. 22. See Otto Rank, Art and Artist, translated by Charles Francis Atkinson, New York. Alfred A. Knopf, Inc., 1943, pp. 40-41. If we compare the neurotic with the productive type, it is evident that the former suffers from an excessive check on his impulsive life. Both are distinguished fundamentally from the average type, who accepts himself as he is, by their tendency to exercise their volition in reshaping themselves. There is, however, this difference, that the neurotic, in this voluntary remaking of his ego, does not get beyond the destructive preliminary work and is therefore unable to detach the whole creative process from his own person and transfer it to an ideological abstraction. The productive artist also begins with that recreation of himself which results in an ideologically constructed ego, but in his case, this ego is then in a position to shift the creative will power from his own person to ideological representations of that person and thus render it objective. It must be admitted that this process is in a measure limited to within the individual himself, and that not only in its constructive, but also in its destructive aspects. This explains why hardly any productive work gets through without morbid crises of a neurotic nature. 23. Abridged from Burton, Op. Cit. Volume 3, pp. 213-28. 24. Bruno Gutmann, Volksbuch der Wadschäger, Leipzig, 1914, page 144. 25. Washington Matthews, Navajo Legends, Memoirs of the American Folklore Society, Volume V, New York, 1897, page 109. For a discussion of the Navajo symbolism of the adventure of the hero, see Jeff King, Maud Oakes, and Joseph Campbell, Where the Two Came to Their Father, A Navajo War Ceremonial, Bollingen Series 1, 2nd ed. Princeton, N.J. Princeton University Press, 1969, pp. 33-49. Joseph Campbell, The Inner Reaches of Outer Space. Myth as Metaphor and as Religion, Novato, C.A. New World Library, 2002, pp. 63-70. And Joseph Campbell, The Spirit Land, Mythos. The Shaping of Our Modern Tradition, Silver Spring, Maryland, Acorn Media, 2007, ed. 26. Dante, Paradiso, 33, 12-21. Translation by Charles Eliot Norton, Op. Cit. Volume 3, page 252, quoted by permission of Houghton Mifflin Company, publishers. 27. See Oswald Spengler, The Decline of the West, translated by Charles Francis Atkinson, New York. Alfred A. Knopf, Inc., 1926-28, Volume I, page 144. Supposing, adds Spengler, that Napoleon himself, as empirical person, had fallen at Marengo, then that which he signified would have been actualized in some other form. The hero, who in this sense and to this degree has become depersonalized, incarnates, during the period of his epical action, the dynamism of the culture process. Between himself as a fact and the other facts there is a harmony of metaphysical rhythm, Ibid. Page 142. This corresponds to Thomas Carlyle's idea of the hero king, as Abelman, on Heroes, Hero Worship and the Heroic in History, Lecture V. 28. During Hellenistic times an amalgamation of Hermes and Thoth was effected in the figure of Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice greatest, who was regarded as the patron and teacher of all the arts, and especially of alchemy. The hermetically sealed retort, in which were placed the mystical metals, was regarded as a realm apart, a special region of heightened forces comparable to the mythological realm. And therein the metals underwent strange metamorphoses and transmutations, symbolical of the transfigurations of the soul under the tutelage of the supernatural. Hermes was the master of the ancient mysteries of initiation, and represented the coming down of divine wisdom into the world, which is represented also in the incarnations of divine saviors, see below. C. C. G. Jung, Psychology and Alchemy, Part 3, Religious Ideas in Alchemy. A. Ridge, 1936. For the retort, see par. 338. For Hermes Trismegistus, see par. 173 and Index, S. V. 29. Wilhelm Steckel, Die Sprache des Traumas, pp. 70-71. 30, Ibid, page 71. 31, Koren, 37-158. 32, adapted from Burden, Op. Cit, Volume 3, pp. 223-30. 33, Compare the Serpent of the Dream. 34, Leonard S. Schultz, Aus Nommelen und Kalahari, Jena, 1907, page 392. 35, Ibid, pp. 404-448. 36, David Clement Scott, A Cyclopedic Dictionary of the Manganya Language Spoken in British Central Africa, Edinburgh, 1892, page 97. Compare the following dream of a 12-year-old boy. One night I dreamt of a foot. I thought it was lying down on the floor and I, not expecting such a thing, fell over it. It seemed to be the same shape as my own foot. The foot suddenly jumped up and started running after me. I thought I jumped right through the window, ran round the yard out into the street, running along as fast as my legs would carry me. I thought I ran to Woolwich, and then it suddenly caught me and shook me, and then I woke up. I have dreamt about this foot several times. The boy had heard a report that his father, who was a sailor, had recently had an accident at sea in which he had broken his ankle. C. W. Kimmins, Children's Dreams, An Unexplored Land, London. George Allen and Unwin, Limited, 1937, page 107. The foot, writes Dr. Freud, is an age-old sexual symbol which occurs even in mythology. 3 Essays on the Theory of Sexuality, page 155. The name Oedipus, it should be noted, means the swollen-footed. 37. Compare V. J. Mansika in Hastings' Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, Volume IV, page 628, article, Demons and Spirits, Slavic. The cluster of articles by a number of authorities, gathered together in this volume under the general heading, Demons and Spirits, treating severally of the African, Oceanic, Assyro-Babylonian, Buddhist, Celtic, Chinese, Christian, Coptic, Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, Indian, Jain, Japanese, Jewish, Muslim, Persian, Roman, Slavic, Teutonic, and Tibetan varieties, is an excellent introduction to the subject. 38, Ibid, page 629. Compare the Lorelei. Mansika's discussion of the Slavic forest, field, and water spirits is based on Hannes Makel's comprehensive Knackers Slavonského Bohosloví, Prague, 1891, an English abridgment of which will be found in Makel's Slavic Mythology, The Mythology of All Races, Volume 3, Boston, 1918. 39. Wilhelm Steckel, Fortschritt und Technik der Traumdeutung, Vienna Leipzig Bern. Verlag für Medizin, Weidmann und C. 1935, page 37. 40. A. R. Radcliffe Brown, The Andaman Islanders, 2nd ed. Cambridge University Press, 1933, pp. 175-77. 41. R. H. Codrington, The Melanesians, Their Anthropology and Folklore, Oxford University Press, 1891, page 189. 42. Jataka, 1-1. Abridged from translation by Eugene Watson Burlingame, Buddhist Parables, Yale University Press, 1922, pp. 32-34. Reprinted by permission of the publishers. 43. Kumaraswamy, Journal of American Folklore 57, 1944, page 129. 44. Jataka, 55-1, 272-75. Adapted, with slight abridgment, from the translation of Eugene Watson Burlingame, Op. Cit. pp. 41-44. Reprinted by permission of Yale University Press, publishers. 45. Nicholas of Cusa, Division Dei, 9, 11. Cited by Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, on the One and Only Transmigrant. Supplement to the Journal of the American Oriental Society, April to June, 1944, page 25. 46. Ovid, Metamorphoses, 7, page 62. 15, page 338. 47. See Figure 14, The Rocks That Crush, The Reeds That Cut, and the Associated Story. 48. Longfellow, The Song of Hiawatha, 8. The adventures ascribed by Longfellow to the Iroquois chieftain Hiawatha belong properly to the Algonquin culture hero Manabajo. Hiawatha was an actual historical personage of the 16th century. See below. 49. Leo Frobenius, Das Zeitalter des Sonnengetz, Berlin, 1904, page 85. 50. Henry Callaway, Nursery Tales and Traditions of the Zulus, London, Trubner, 1868, page 331. 51. Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, Akimkana, Self-Nodding, New Indian Antiquary, Volume 3, Bombay, 1940, page 6, note 14, citing and discussing Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, I, page 63, 3. 52. Sir James G. Fraser, The Golden Bough, 1-volume edition, pp. 347-49. Copyright 1922 by the Macmillan Company and used with their permission. 53. Ibid, page 280. 54. Duarte Barbosa, A Description of the Coasts of East Africa and Malabar in the Beginning of the 16th Century. London. Hakluyt Society, 1866, page 172. Cited by Fraser, Op. Cit. pp. 274-75. Reprinted by permission of the Macmillan Company, publishers. Figure 21. The Temptation of Saint Anthony, copperplate engraving, Germany, circa A.D. 1470. Chapter I. Initiation 1. The Road of Trials. Once having traversed the threshold, the hero moves in a dream landscape of curiously fluid, ambiguous forms, where he must survive a succession of trials. This is a favorite phase of the myth adventure. It has produced a world literature of miraculous tests and ordeals. The hero is covertly aided by the advice, amulets, and secret agents of the supernatural helper whom he met before his entrance into this region. Or it may be that he here discovers for the first time that there is a benign power everywhere supporting him in his superhuman passage. One of the best known and most charming examples of the difficult tasks motif is that of Psyche's quest for her lost lover, Cupid. 1. Here all the principal roles are reversed. Instead of the lover trying to win his bride, it is the bride trying to win her lover. And instead of a cruel father withholding his daughter from the lover, it is the jealous mother, Venus, hiding her son, Cupid, from his bride. When Psyche pleaded with Venus, the goddess grasped her violently by the hair and dashed her head upon the ground, then took a great quantity of wheat, barley, millet, poppy seed, peas, lentils, and beans, mingled these all together in a heap, and commanded the girl to sort them before night. Psyche was aided by an army of ants. Venus told her, next, to gather the golden wool of certain dangerous wild sheep, sharp of horn and poisonous of bite, that inhabited an inaccessible valley in a dangerous wood. But a green reed instructed her how to gather from the reeds round about the golden locks shed by the sheep in their passage. The goddess now required a bottle of water from a freezing spring high on a towering rock beset by sleepless dragons. An eagle approached and accomplished the marvelous task. Psyche was ordered, finally, to bring from the abyss of the underworld a box full of supernatural beauty. But a high tower told her how to go down to the world below, gave her coins for Charon and sops for Cerberus, and sped her on her way. Psyche's voyage to the underworld is but one of innumerable such adventures undertaken by the heroes of fairy tale and myth. Among the most perilous are those of the shamans of the peoples of the farthest north, the Lapps, Siberians, Eskimo, and certain American Indian tribes, when they go to seek out and recover the lost or abducted souls of the sick. The shaman of the Siberians is clothed for the adventure in a magical costume representing a bird or reindeer, the shadow principle of the shaman himself, the shape of his soul. His drum is his animal, his eagle, reindeer, or horse, he is said to fly or ride on it. The stick that he carries is another of his aids, and he is attended by a host of invisible familiars. An early voyager among the Lapps has left a vivid description of the weird performance of one of these strange emissaries into the kingdoms of the dead. 2. Since the yonder world is a place of everlasting night, the ceremonial of the shaman has to take place after dark. The friends and neighbors gather in the flickering, dimly lighted hut of the patient, and follow attentively the gesticulations of the magician. First he summons the helping spirits. These arrive, invisible to all but himself. 2 women in ceremonial attire, but without belts and wearing linen hoods, a man without hood or belt, and a girl not as yet adult are in attendance. The shaman uncovers his head, loosens his belt and shoestrings, covers his face with his hands and begins to twirl in a variety of circles. Suddenly, with very violent gestures, he shouts, "Fit out the reindeer. Ready to boat." Snatching up an axe, he begins striking himself about the knees with it and swinging it in the direction of the 3 women. He drags burning logs out of the fire with his naked hands. He dashes 3 times around each of the women and finally collapses, like a dead man. During the whole time, no one has been permitted to touch him. While he reposes now in trance, he is to be watched so closely that not even a fly may settle upon him. His spirit has departed, and he is viewing the sacred mountains with their inhabiting gods. The women in attendance whisper to each other, trying to guess in what part of the yonder world he now may be. The women may be unable to locate the shaman's position in the yonder world, in which case his spirit may fail to return to the body. Or the wandering spirit of an enemy shaman may engage him in battle or else lead him astray. It is said that there have been many shamans who failed to return. 3. If they mention the correct mountain, the shaman stirs either a hand or a foot. At length he begins to return. In a low, weak voice he utters the words he has heard in the world below. Then the women begin to sing. The shaman slowly awakes, declaring both the cause of the illness and the manner of sacrifice to be made. Then he announces the length of time it will take for the patient to grow well. On his laborious journey, reports another observer, the shaman has to encounter and master a number of differing obstacles, pudak, which are not always easily overcome. After he has wandered through dark forests and over massive ranges of mountains, where he occasionally comes across the bones of other shamans and their animal mounts who have died along the way, he reaches an opening in the ground. The most difficult stages of the adventure now begin, when the depths of the underworld with their remarkable manifestations open before him. After he has appeased the watchers of the kingdom of the dead and made his way past the numerous perils, he comes at last to the lord of the underworld, Erlik himself. And the latter rushes against him, horribly bellowing, but if the shaman is sufficiently skillful he can soothe the monster back again with promises of luxurious offerings. This moment of the dialogue with Erlik is the crisis of the ceremonial. The shaman passes into an ecstasy. 4. In every primitive tribe, writes Dr. Geza Roheim, we find the medicine man in the center of society, and it is easy to show that the medicine man is either a neurotic or a psychotic, or at least that his art is based on the same mechanisms as a neurosis or a psychosis. Human groups are actuated by their group ideals, and these are always based on the infantile situation. 5. The infancy situation is modified or inverted by the process of maturation, again modified by the necessary adjustment to reality, yet it is there and supplies those unseen libidinal ties without which no human groups could exist. 6. The medicine men, therefore, are simply making both visible and public the systems of symbolic fantasy that are present in the psyche of every adult member of their society. They are the leaders in this infantile game and the lightning conductors of common anxiety. They fight the demons so that others can hunt the prey and in general fight reality. 7. Figure 22. Psyche and Karen, Oil on Canvas, England, circa A.D. 1873. And so it happens that if anyone, in whatever society, undertakes for himself the perilous journey into the darkness by descending, either intentionally or unintentionally, into the crooked lanes of his own spiritual labyrinth, he soon finds himself in a landscape of symbolical figures, any one of which may swallow him, which is no less marvelous than the wild Siberian world of the Pudak and sacred mountains. In the vocabulary of the mystics, this is the second stage of the way, that of the purification of the self, when the senses are cleansed and humbled, and the energies and interests concentrated upon transcendental things. 8. Or in a vocabulary of more modern turn, this is the process of dissolving, transcending, or transmuting the infantile images of our personal past. In our dreams the ageless perils, gargoyles, trials, secret helpers, and instructive figures are nightly still encountered, and in their forms we may see reflected not only the whole picture of our present case, but also the clue to what we must do to be saved. I stood before a dark cave, wanting to go in, was the dream of a patient at the beginning of his analysis, and I shuddered at the thought that I might not be able to find my way back. 9. I saw one beast after another, Emanuel Swedenborg recorded in his dream book, for the night of October 19 to 20, 1744, and they spread their wings, and were dragons. I was flying over them, but one of them was supporting me. 10. Asterisk and the dramatist Friedrich Hebel recorded, a century later, April 13, 1844, in my dream I was being drawn with great force through the sea. There were terrifying abysses, with here and there a rock to which it was possible to hold. 11. Themistocles dreamed that a snake wound itself around his body, then crept up to his neck, and when it touched his face became an eagle that took him in its talons and, carrying him upward, bore him a long distance, and set him down on a golden herald's staff that suddenly appeared, so safely that he was all at once relieved of his great anxiety and fear. 12. The specific psychological difficulties of the dreamer frequently are revealed with touching simplicity and force. I had to climb a mountain. There were all kinds of obstacles in the way. I had now to jump over a ditch, now to get over a hedge, and finally to stand still because I had lost my breath. This was the dream of a stutterer. 13. I stood beside a lake that appeared to be completely still. A storm came up abruptly and high waves arose, so that my whole face was splashed. The dream of a girl afraid of blushing. Erythrophobia, whose face, when she blushed, would become wet with perspiration. 14. I was following a girl who was going ahead of me, along the dark street. I could see her from behind only and admired her beautiful figure. A mighty desire seized me, and I was running after her. Suddenly a beam, as though released from a spring, came across the street and blocked the way. I awoke with my heart pounding. The patient was a homosexual, the transverse beam, a phallic symbol. 15. I got into a car, but did not know how to drive. A man who sat behind me gave me instructions. Finally, things were going quite well and we came to a plaza, where there were a number of women standing. The mother of my fiancée received me with great joy. The man was impotent, but had found an instructor in the psychoanalyst. 16. A stone had broken my windshield. I was now open to the storm and rain. Tears came to my eyes. Could I ever reach my destination in this car? The dreamer was a young woman who had lost her virginity and could not get over it. 17. I saw half of a horse lying on the ground. It had only one wing and was trying to rise, but was unable to do so. The patient was a poet who had to earn his daily bread by working as a journalist. 18. I was bitten by an infant. The dreamer was suffering from a psychosexual infantilism. 19. I am locked with my brother in a dark room. He has a large knife in his hand. I am afraid of him. You will drive me crazy and bring me to the madhouse, I tell him. He laughs with malicious pleasure, replying, you will always be caught with me. A chain is wrapped around the two of us. I glanced at my legs and noticed for the first time the thick iron chain that bound together my brother and myself. The brother, comments Dr. Steckel, was the patient's illness. 20. I am going over a narrow bridge, dreams a 16-year-old girl. Suddenly it breaks under me and I plunge into the water. An officer dives in after me and brings me, with his strong arms, to the bank. Suddenly it seems to me then that I am a dead body. The officer too looks very pale, like a corpse. 21. The dreamer is absolutely abandoned and alone in a deep hole of a cellar. The walls of his room keep getting narrower and narrower so that he cannot stir. In this image are combined the ideas of mother womb, imprisonment, cell, and grave. 22. I am dreaming that I have to go through endless corridors. Then I remain for a long time in a little room that looks like the bathing pool in the public baths. They compel me to leave the pool, and I have to pass again through a moist, slippery shaft until I come through a little latticed door into the open. I feel like one newly born, and I think, this means a spiritual rebirth for me, through my analysis. 23. There can be no question. The psychological dangers through which earlier generations were guided by the symbols and spiritual exercises of their mythological and religious inheritance, we today, insofar as we are unbelievers, or, if believers, insofar as our inherited beliefs fail to represent the real problems of contemporary life, must face alone, or, at best, with only tentative, impromptu, and not often very effective guidance. This is our problem as modern, enlightened individuals, for whom all gods and devils have been rationalized out of existence. Nevertheless, in the multitude of myths and legends that have been preserved to us, or collected from the ends of the earth, we may yet see delineated something of our still human course. To hear and profit, however, one may have to submit somehow to purgation and surrender. And that is part of our problem, just how to do that. Or do ye think that ye shall enter the garden of bliss without such trials as came to those who passed away before you? 24. The oldest recorded account of the passage through the gates of metamorphosis is the Sumerian myth of the goddess Inanna's descent to the nether world. From the great above, she set her mind toward the great below. The goddess, from the great above, she set her mind toward the great below. Inanna, from the great above, she set her mind toward the great below. My lady abandoned heaven, abandoned earth. To the nether world she descended. Inanna abandoned heaven, abandoned earth. To the nether world she descended. Abandoned lordship, abandoned ladyship. To the nether world she descended. She adorned herself with her queenly robes and jewels. 7 divine decrees she fastened at her belt. She was ready to enter the land of no return, the nether world of death and darkness, governed by her enemy and sister goddess, Ereshkigal. In fear, lest her sister should put her to death, Inanna instructed Ninshubur, her messenger, to go to heaven and set up a hue and cry for her in the assembly hall of the gods if after 3 days she should have failed to return. Inanna descended. She approached the temple made of lapis lazuli, and at the gate was met by the chief gatekeeper, who demanded to know who she was and why she had come. I am the queen of heaven, the place where the sun rises, she replied. If thou art the queen of heaven, he said, the place where the sun rises, why, pray, hast thou come to the land of no return? On the road whose traveler returns not, how has thy heart led thee? Inanna declared that she had come to attend the funeral rites of her sister's husband, the Lord Gugalana. Whereupon Neti, the gatekeeper, bid her stay until he should report to Ereshkigal. Neti was instructed to open to the Queen of Heaven the 7 gates, but to abide by the custom and remove at each portal a part of her clothing. To the pure Inanna he says, Come, Inanna, enter. Upon her entering the first gate, the Shugara, the crown of the plane, of her head was removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the second gate, the rod of lapis lazuli was removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the third gate, the small lapis lazuli stones of her neck were removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the fourth gate, the sparkling stones of her breast were removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the fifth gate, the gold ring of her hand was removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the sixth gate, the breastplate of her breast was removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Upon her entering the seventh gate, all the garments of ladyship of her body were removed. What, pray, is this? Extraordinarily, O Inanna, have the decrees of the nether world been perfected. O Inanna, do not question the rights of the nether world. Naked, she was brought before the throne. She bowed low. The 7 judges of the netherworld, the Anunnaki, sat before the throne of Ereshkigal, and they fastened their eyes upon Inanna, the eyes of death. At their word, the word which tortures the spirit, the sick woman was turned into a corpse. The corpse was hung from a stake. 25. Inanna and Ereshkigal, the 2 sisters, light and dark respectively, together represent, according to the antique manner of symbolization, the one goddess in 2 aspects, and their confrontation epitomizes the whole sense of the difficult road of trials. The hero, whether god or goddess, man or woman, the figure in a myth or the dreamer of a dream, discovers and assimilates his opposite, his own unsuspected self, either by swallowing it or by being swallowed. One by one the resistances are broken. He must put aside his pride, his virtue, beauty, and life, and bow or submit to the absolutely intolerable. Then he finds that he and his opposite are not of differing species, but one flesh. The ordeal is a deepening of the problem of the first threshold, and the question is still in balance. Can the ego put itself to death? For many-headed is this surrounding hydra. 1 head cut off, 2 more appear, unless the right caustic is applied to the mutilated stump. The original departure into the land of trials represented only the beginning of the long and really perilous path of initiatory conquests and moments of illumination. Dragons have now to be slain and surprising barriers passed, again, and again. Meanwhile there will be a multitude of preliminary victories, unretainable ecstasies, and momentary glimpses of the wonderful land. 2. The meeting with the goddess. Figure 23. Mother of the gods, carved wood, Egba Yoruba, Nigeria, date uncertain. The ultimate adventure, when all the barriers and ogres have been overcome, is commonly represented as a mystical marriage, Hyros ga micro O's, of the triumphant hero soul with the queen goddess of the world. This is the crisis at the nadir, at the zenith, or at the uttermost edge of the earth, at the central point of the cosmos, in the tabernacle of the temple, or within the darkness of the deepest chamber of the heart. In the west of Ireland they still tell the tale of the Prince of the Lonesome Isle and the Lady of Tubber Tinti. Hoping to heal the Queen of Erin, the heroic youth had undertaken to go for 3 bottles of the water of Tubber Tinti, the flaming fairy well. Following the advice of a supernatural aunt whom he encountered on the way, and riding a wonderful, dirty, lean little shaggy horse that she gave to him, he crossed a river of fire and escaped the touch of a grove of poison trees. The horse with the speed of the wind shot past the end of the castle of Tubber Tinti. The prince sprang from its back through an open window, and came down inside, safe and sound. The whole place, enormous in extent, was filled with sleeping giants and monsters of sea and land, great whales, long slippery eels, bears, and beasts of every form and kind. The prince passed through them and over them till he came to a great stairway. At the head of the stairway he went into a chamber, where he found the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, stretched on a couch asleep. "I'll have nothing to say to you," thought he, and went on to the next, and so he looked into 12 chambers. In each was a woman more beautiful than the one before. But when he reached the 13th chamber and opened the door, the flash of gold took the sight from his eyes. He stood a while till the sight came back, and then entered. In the great bright chamber was a golden couch, resting on wheels of gold. The wheels turned continually. The couch went round and round, never stopping night or day. On the couch lay the Queen of Tubber Tinti, and if her 12 maidens were beautiful, they would not be beautiful if seen near her. At the foot of the couch was Tubber Tinti itself, the well of fire. There was a golden cover upon the well, and it went around continually with the couch of the queen. "Upon my word," said the prince, "I'll rest here a while." And he went up on the couch and never left it for 6 days and nights. 26. The Lady of the House of Sleep is a familiar figure in fairy tale and myth. We have already spoken of her, under the forms of Brynhild and Little Briar Rose. 27. She is the paragon of all paragons of beauty, the reply to all desire, the bliss-bestowing goal of every hero's earthly and unearthly quest. She is mother, sister, mistress, bride. Whatever in the world has lured, whatever has seemed to promise joy, has been premonitory of her existence, in the deep of sleep, if not in the cities and forests of the world. For she is the incarnation of the promise of perfection, the soul's assurance that, at the conclusion of its exile in a world of organized inadequacies, the bliss that once was known will be known again. The comforting, the nourishing, the good mother, young and beautiful, who was known to us, and even tasted, in the remotest past. Time sealed her away, yet she is dwelling still, like one who sleeps in timelessness, at the bottom of the timeless sea. The remembered image is not only benign, however, for the bad mother too. 1. The absent, unattainable mother, against whom aggressive fantasies are directed, and from whom a counter-aggression is feared. 2. The hampering, forbidding, punishing mother. 3. The mother who would hold to herself the grown child trying to push away. And finally, 4. The desired but forbidden mother, Oedipus complex, whose presence is a lure to dangerous desire, castration complex. persists in the hidden land of the adult's infant recollection and is sometimes even the greater force. She is at the root of such unattainable great goddess figures as that of the chaste and terrible Diana, whose absolute ruin of the young sportsman Actaeon illustrates what a blast of fear is contained in such symbols of the mind's and body's blocked desire. Actaeon chanced to see the dangerous goddess at noon, that fateful moment when the sun breaks in its youthful, strong ascent, balances, and begins the mighty plunge to death. He had left his companions to rest, together with his blooded dogs, after a morning of running game, and without conscious purpose had gone wandering, straying from his familiar hunting groves and fields, exploring through the neighboring woods. He discovered a vale, thick grown with cypresses and pine. He penetrated curiously into its fastness. There was a grotto within it, watered by a gentle, purling spring and with a stream that widened to a grassy pool. This shaded nook was the resort of Diana, and at that moment she was bathing among her nymphs, absolutely naked. She had put aside her hunting spear, her quiver, her unstrung bow, as well as her sandals and her robe. And one of the nude nymphs had bound up her tresses into a knot. Some of the others were pouring water from capacious urns. When the young, roving male broke into the pleasant haunt, a shriek of female terror went up, and all the bodies crowded about their mistress, trying to hide her from the profane eye. But she stood above them, head and shoulders. The youth had seen, and was continuing to see. She glanced for her bow, but it was out of reach, so she quickly took up what was at hand, namely water, and flung it into Actaeon's face. "Now you are free to tell, if you can," she cried at him angrily, "that you have seen the goddess nude." Figure 24. Diana and Actaeon, Marble Metope, Hellenic, Sicily, circa 460 B.C. Antlers sprouted on his head. His neck grew great and long, his ear tips sharp. His arms lengthened to legs, and his hands and feet became hooves. Terrified, he bounded, marveling that he should move so rapidly. But when he paused for breath and drink and beheld his features in a clear pool, he reared back aghast. A terrible fate then befell Actaeon. His own hounds, catching the scent of the great stag, came baying through the wood. In a moment of joy at hearing them he paused, but then spontaneously took fright and fled. The pack followed, gradually gaining. When they had come to his heels, the first of them flying at his flank, he tried to cry their names, but the sound in his throat was not human. They fixed him with their fangs. He went down, and his own hunting companions, shouting encouragement at the dogs, arrived in time to deliver the coup de grace. Diana, miraculously aware of the flight and death, could now rest appeased. 28. The mythological figure of the universal mother imputes to the cosmos the feminine attributes of the first, nourishing and protecting presence. The fantasy is primarily spontaneous, for there exists a close and obvious correspondence between the attitude of the young child toward its mother and that of the adult toward the surrounding material world. 29. But there has been also, in numerous religious traditions, a consciously controlled pedagogical utilization of this archetypal image for the purpose of the purging, balancing, and initiation of the mind into the nature of the visible world. In the tantric books of medieval and modern India, the sacred writings, sastras, of Hinduism are divided into four classes. 1. Sruti, which are regarded as direct divine revelation. These include the four Vedas, ancient books of Psalms, and certain of the Upanishads, ancient books of philosophy. 2. Smrta, which include the traditional teachings of the orthodox sages, canonical instructions for domestic ceremonials, and certain works of secular and religious law, as well as the great Hindu epic, the Mahabharata, which of course includes the Bhagavad Gita. 3. Purana, which are the Hindu mythological and epic works par excellence. These treat of cosmogonic, theological, astronomical, and physical knowledge. And 4. Tantra, texts describing techniques and rituals for the worship of deities, and for the attainment of supernormal power. Among the Tantras are a group of particularly important scriptures, called Agamas, which are supposed to have been revealed directly by the universal god Shiva and his goddess Parvati. They are termed, therefore, the fifth Veda. These support a mystical tradition known specifically as the Tantra, which has exercised a pervasive influence on the later forms of Hindu and Buddhist iconography. Tantric symbolism was carried by medieval Buddhism out of India into Tibet, China, and Japan. The abode of the goddess is called Mani Dvipa, the Island of Jewels. Her couch and throne is there, in a grove of wish-fulfilling trees. The beaches of the isle are of golden sands. They are laved by the still waters of the ocean of the nectar of immortality. The goddess is red with the fire of life. The earth, the solar system, the galaxies of far-extending space, all swell within her womb. For she is the world creatrix, ever mother, ever virgin. She encompasses the encompassing, nourishes the nourishing, and is the life of everything that lives. She is also the death of everything that dies. The whole round of existence is accomplished within her sway, from birth, through adolescence, maturity, and senescence, to the grave. She is the womb and the tomb, the sow that eats her farrow. Thus she unites the good and the bad, exhibiting the two modes of the remembered mother, not as personal only, but as universal. The devotee is expected to contemplate the two with equal equanimity. Through this exercise his spirit is purged of its infantile, inappropriate sentimentalities and resentments, and his mind open to the inscrutable presence which exists, not primarily as good and bad, with respect to his childlike human convenience, his weal and woe, but as the law and image of the nature of being. The great Hindu mystic of the 19th century Ramakrishna, 1836–1886, was a priest in a temple newly erected to the Cosmic Mother at Dakshineswar, a suburb of Calcutta. The temple image displayed the divinity in her two aspects simultaneously, the terrible and the benign. Her four arms exhibited the symbols of her universal power. The upper left hand brandishing a bloody saber, the lower gripping by the hair a severed human head. The upper right was lifted in the "fear not" gesture, the lower extended in bestowal of boons. As necklace she wore a garland of human heads, her kilt was a girdle of human arms, her long tongue was out to lick blood. She was cosmic power, the totality of the universe, the harmonization of all the pairs of opposites, combining wonderfully the terror of absolute destruction with an impersonal yet motherly reassurance. As change, the river of time, the fluidity of life, the goddess at once creates, preserves, and destroys. Her name is Kali, the Black One, her title, the ferry across the ocean of existence. 30. Figure 25. Devouring Kali, carved wood, Nepal, 18th–19th century A.D. One quiet afternoon Ramakrishna beheld a beautiful woman ascend from the Ganges and approach the grove in which he was meditating. He perceived that she was about to give birth to a child. In a moment the babe was born, and she gently nursed it. Presently, however, she assumed a horrible aspect, took the infant in her now ugly jaws and crushed it, chewed it. Swallowing it, she returned again to the Ganges, where she disappeared. 31. Only geniuses capable of the highest realization can support the full revelation of the sublimity of this goddess. For lesser men she reduces her effulgence and permits herself to appear in forms concordant with their undeveloped powers. Fully to behold her would be a terrible accident for any person not spiritually prepared, as witness the unlucky case of the lusty young buck Actaeon. No saint was he, but a sportsman unprepared for the revelation of the form that must be beheld without the normal human, i.e., infantile, over and undertones of desire, surprise, and fear. Woman, in the picture language of mythology, represents the totality of what can be known. The hero is the one who comes to know. As he progresses in the slow initiation which is life, the form of the goddess undergoes for him a series of transfigurations. She can never be greater than himself, though she can always promise more than he is yet capable of comprehending. She lures, she guides, she bids him burst his fetters. And if he can match her import, the two, the knower and the known, will be released from every limitation. Woman is the guide to the sublime acme of sensuous adventure. By deficient eyes she is reduced to inferior states, by the evil eye of ignorance she is spellbound to banality and ugliness. But she is redeemed by the eyes of understanding. The hero who can take her as she is, without undue commotion but with the kindness and assurance she requires, is potentially the king, the incarnate god, of her created world. A story, for example, is told of the 5 sons of the Irish king Eochaid, of how, having gone one day hunting, they found themselves astray, shut in on every hand. Thirsty, they set off, one by one, to look for water. Fergus was the first, and he lights on a well, over which he finds an old woman standing sentry. The fashion of the hag is this: blacker than coal every joint and segment of her was, from crown to ground, comparable to a wild horse's tail, the grey wiry mass of hair that pierced her scalp's upper surface. With her sickle of a greenish-looking tusk that was in her head, and curled till it touched her ear, she could lop the verdant branch of an oak in full bearing. Blackened and smoke-bleared eyes she had, nose awry, wide nostriled, a wrinkled and freckled belly, variously unwholesome, warped crooked shins, garnished with massive ankles and a pair of capacious shovels. Knotty knees she had and livid nails. The beldame's whole description in fact was disgusting. "That's the way it is it?" said the lad, and, "That's the very way," she answered. "Is it guarding the well thou art?" he asked, and she said, "It is." "Dost thou license me to take away some water?" "I do," she consented, "yet only so that I have of thee one kiss on my cheek." "Not so," said he. "Then water shall not be conceded by me. My word I give," he went on, "that sooner than give thee a kiss I would perish of thirst." Then the young man departed to the place where his brethren were, and told them that he had not gotten water. Oliel, Brian, and Fiatra, likewise, went on the quest and equally attained to the identical well. Each solicited the old thing for water, but denied her the kiss. Finally it was Niall who went, and he came to the very well. "Let me have water, woman," he cried. "I will give it," said she, "and bestow on me a kiss." He answered, "For be giving thee a kiss, I will even hug thee." Then he bends to embrace her, and gives her a kiss. Which operation ended, and when he looked at her, in the whole world was not a young woman of gait more graceful, in universal semblance fairer than she. To be likened to the last fallen snow lying in trenches every portion of her was, from crown to sole. Plump and queenly forearms, fingers long and taper, straight legs of a lovely hue she had. 2 sandals of the white bronze betwixt her smooth and soft white feet and the earth. About her was an ample mantle of the choicest fleece pure crimson, and in the garment a brooch of white silver. She had lustrous teeth of pearl, great regal eyes, mouth red as the rowanberry. "Here, woman, is a galaxy of charms," said the young man. "That is true indeed. And who art thou?" he pursued. Royal Rule, am I, she answered, and uttered this. King of Terra, I am Royal Rule. Go now, she said, to thy brethren, and take with thee water. Moreover, thine and thy children's forever the kingdom and supreme power shall be. And as at the first thou hast seen me ugly, brutish, oathly, in the end, beautiful, even so is royal rule. For without battles, without fierce conflict, it may not be won. But in the result, he that is king of no matter what shows comely and handsome forth. 32. Such is royal rule? Such is life itself. The goddess guardian of the inexhaustible well, whether as Fergus, or as Actaeon, or as the prince of the lonesome isle discovered her, requires that the hero should be endowed with what the troubadours and minnesingers term the gentle heart. Not by the animal desire of an Actaeon, not by the fastidious revulsion of such as Fergus, can she be comprehended and rightly served, but only by gentleness. Aware, gentle sympathy. It was named in the romantic courtly poetry of 10th to 12th century Japan. Within the gentle heart love shelters himself. As birds within the green shade of the grove. Before the gentle heart, in nature's scheme. Love was not, nor the gentle heart ere love. For with the sun, at once. So sprang the light immediately, nor was its birth before the sun's. And love hath his effect in gentleness. Of very self, even as within the middle fire the heat's excess. 33. The meeting with the goddess, who is incarnate in every woman, is the final test of the talent of the hero to win the boon of love, charity, amor fati, which is life itself enjoyed as the encasement of eternity. And when the adventurer, in this context, is not a youth but a maid, she is the one who, by her qualities, her beauty, or her yearning, is fit to become the consort of an immortal. Then the heavenly husband descends to her and conducts her to his bed, whether she will or no. And if she has shunned him, the scales fall from her eyes. If she has sought him, her desire finds its peace. The Arapaho girl who followed the porcupine up the stretching tree was enticed to the camp circle of the people of the sky. There she became the wife of a heavenly youth. It was he who, under the form of the luring porcupine, had seduced her to his supernatural home. The king's daughter of the nursery tale, the day following the adventure at the well, heard a thumping at her castle door. The frog had arrived to press her to her bargain. And in spite of her great disgust, he followed her to her chair at table, shared the meal from her little golden plate and cup, even insisted on going to sleep with her in her little silken bed. In a tantrum she plucked him from the floor and flung him at the wall. When he fell, he was no frog but a king's son with kind and beautiful eyes. And then we hear that they were married and were driven in a beautiful coach back to the young man's waiting kingdom, where the two became a king and queen. Once again, when Psyche had accomplished all of the difficult tasks, Jupiter himself gave to her a draught of the elixir of immortality, so that she is now and forever united with Cupid, her beloved, in the paradise of perfected form. The Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches celebrate the same mystery in the Feast of the Assumption. The Virgin Mary is taken up into the bridal chamber of heaven, where the King of Kings sits on his starry throne. O Virgin most prudent, whither goest thou, bright as the morn? All beautiful and sweet art thou, O daughter of Zion, fair as the moon, elect as the sun. 34. Figure 26. Vierge ouvrante, opening virgin, polychrome wood, France, 15th century A.D. 3. Woman as the temptress. The mystical marriage with the queen goddess of the world represents the hero's total mastery of life. For the woman is life, the hero its knower and master. And the testings of the hero, which were preliminary to his ultimate experience and deed, were symbolical of those crises of realization by means of which his consciousness came to be amplified and made capable of enduring the full possession of the mother-destroyer, his inevitable bride. With that he knows that he and the Father are one. He is in the Father's place. Thus phrased, in extremist terms, the problem may sound remote from the affairs of normal human creatures. Nevertheless, every failure to cope with a life situation must be laid, in the end, to a restriction of consciousness. Wars and temper tantrums are the makeshifts of ignorance. Regrets are illuminations come too late. The whole sense of the ubiquitous myth of the hero's passage is that it shall serve as a general pattern for men and women, wherever they may stand along the scale. Therefore it is formulated in the broadest terms. The individual has only to discover his own position with reference to this general human formula, and let it then assist him past his restricting walls. Who and where are his ogres? Those are the reflections of the unsolved enigmas of his own humanity. What are his ideals? Those are the symptoms of his grasp of life. In the office of the modern psychoanalyst, the stages of the hero adventure come to light again in the dreams and hallucinations of the patient. Depth beyond depth of self-ignorance is fathomed, with the analyst in the role of the helper, the initiatory priest. And always, after the first thrills of getting underway, the adventure develops into a journey of darkness, horror, disgust, and phantasmagoric fears. The crux of the curious difficulty lies in the fact that our conscious views of what life ought to be seldom correspond to what life really is. Generally we refuse to admit within ourselves, or within our friends, the fullness of that pushing, self-protective, malodorous, carnivorous, lecherous fever which is the very nature of the organic cell. Rather, we tend to perfume, whitewash, and reinterpret. Meanwhile imagining that all the flies in the ointment, all the hairs in the soup, are the faults of some unpleasant someone else. But when it suddenly dawns on us, or is forced to our attention, that everything we think or do is necessarily tainted with the odor of the flesh, then, not uncommonly, there is experienced a moment of revulsion. Life, the acts of life, the organs of life, woman in particular as the great symbol of life, become intolerable to the pure soul. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. O God, God, so exclaims the great spokesman of this moment, Hamlet. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. Fie on't, ah fie, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed things rank and gross in nature. Possess it merely, that it should come to this. 35. The innocent delight of Oedipus in his first possession of the queen turns to an agony of spirit when he learns who the woman is. Like Hamlet, he is beset by the moral image of the father. Like Hamlet, he turns from the fair features of the world to search the darkness for a higher kingdom than this of the incest and adultery-ridden, luxurious, and incorrigible mother. The seeker of the life beyond life must press beyond her, surpass the temptations of her call, and soar to the immaculate ether beyond. For a god called him many times, from many sides at once. Ho, Oedipus! Thou Oedipus, why are we tarrying? It is full long that thou art stayed for. Come. 36. Where this Oedipus-Hamlet revulsion remains to beset the soul, there the world, the body, and woman above all become the symbols no longer of victory but of defeat. A monastic puritanical, world-negating ethical system then radically and immediately transfigures all the images of myth. No longer can the hero rest in innocence with the goddess of the flesh, for she has become the queen of sin. So long as a man has any regard for this corpse-like body, writes the Hindu monk Sankaracharya, he is impure, and suffers from his enemies as well as from birth, disease and death, but when he thinks of himself as pure, as the essence of the good, and the immovable, he becomes free. Throw far away this limitation of a body which is inert and filthy by nature. Think of it no longer. For a thing that has been vomited, as you should vomit forth your body, can excite only disgust when it is recalled again to mind. 37. This is a point of view familiar to the West from the lives and writings of the saints. When St. Peter observed that his daughter, Petronilla, was too beautiful, he obtained from God the favor that she should fall sick of a fever. Now one day when his disciples were by him, Titus said to him, You who cure all maladies, why do you not fix it so that Petronilla can get up from her bed? And Peter replied to him, Because I am satisfied with her condition as it is. This was by no means as much as to say he had not the power to cure her, for, immediately, he said to her, Get up, Petronilla, and make haste to wait on us. The young girl, cured, got up and came to serve them. But when she had finished, her father said to her, Petronilla, return to your bed. She returned, and was straightway taken again with the fever. And later, when she had begun to be perfect in her love of God, her father restored her to perfect health. At that time a noble gentleman named Flaccus, struck by her beauty, came to bid for her hand in marriage. She replied, If you wish to marry me, send a group of young girls to conduct me to your home. But when these had arrived, Petronilla directly set herself to fast and pray. Receiving communion, she lay back in her bed, and after 3 days rendered her soul up to God. 38. As a child, Saint Bernard of Clairvaux suffered from headaches. A young woman came to visit him one day, to soothe his sufferings with her songs. But the indignant child drove her from the room. And God rewarded him for his zeal, for he got up from his bed immediately, and was cured. Now the ancient enemy of man, perceiving little Bernard to be of such wholesome disposition, exerted himself to set traps for his chastity. When the child, however, at the instigation of the devil, one day had stood staring at a lady for some time, suddenly he blushed for himself, and entered the icy water of a pond in penance, where he remained until frozen to his bones. Another time, when he was asleep, a young girl came naked to his bed. Bernard, becoming aware of her, yielded in silence the part of the bed in which he lay, and rolling over to the other side returned to sleep. Having stroked and caressed him for some time, the unhappy creature presently was so taken with shame, in spite of her shamelessness, that she got up and fled, full of horror at herself and of admiration for the young man. Still again, when Bernard together with some friends one time had accepted the hospitality of the home of a certain wealthy lady, she, observing his beauty, was seized with a passion to sleep with him. She arose that night from her bed, and came and placed herself at the side of her guest. But he, the minute he felt someone close to him, began to shout, Thief! Thief! Immediately thereupon, the woman scurried away, the entire house was on its feet, lanterns were lit, and everybody hunted around for the burglar. But since none was found, all returned to their beds and to sleep, with the sole exception of this lady, who, unable to close her eyes, again arose and slipped into the bed of her guest. Bernard began to shout, Thief! And again the alarms and investigations. After that, even a third time this lady brought herself to be spurned in like fashion, so that finally she gave up her wicked project, out of either fear or discouragement. On the road next day the companions of Bernard asked him why he had had so many dreams about thieves. And he replied to them, I had really to repel the attacks of a thief, for my hostess tried to rob me of a treasure, which, had I lost it, I should never have been able to regain. All of which convinced Bernard that it was a pretty risky thing to live together with the serpent. So he planned to be quit of the world and enter the monastic order of the Cistercians. 39. Not even monastery walls, however, not even the remoteness of the desert, can defend against the female presences. For as long as the hermit's flesh clings to his bones and pulses warm, the images of life are alert to storm his mind. Saint Anthony, practicing his austerities in the Egyptian Thebaid, was troubled by voluptuous hallucinations perpetrated by female devils attracted to his magnetic solitude. Apparitions of this order, with loins of irresistible attraction and breasts bursting to be touched, are known to all the hermit resorts of history. Ah, bel hermit. Si tu passais ton doit sur mon épaule, si serait comme une traînée de fou dans tes veines. La possession de la moindre place de mon corps impliera d'une joie plus vehement que la conquête d'un empire. Avance tes lèvres. 40. Asterisk writes the New Englander Cotton Mather. The wilderness through which we are passing to the promised land is all filled with fiery flying serpents. But, blessed be God, none of them have hitherto so fastened upon us as to confound us utterly. All our way to heaven lies by dens of lions and the mounts of leopards. There are incredible droves of devils in our way. We are poor travelers in a world which is as well the devil's field as the devil's jail. A world in which every nook whereof, the devil is encamped with bands of robbers to pester all that have their faces looking Zionward. 41. 4. Atonement with the Father. The bow of God's wrath is bent, and the arrow made ready on the string. And justice bends the arrow at your heart, and strains the bow, and it is nothing but the mere pleasure of God, and that of an angry God, without any promise or obligation at all, that keeps the arrow one moment from being made drunk with your blood. With these words Jonathan Edwards threatened the hearts of his New England congregation by disclosing to them, unmitigated, the ogre aspect of the Father. He riveted them to the pews with images of the mythological ordeal, for though the Puritan prohibited the graven image, yet he allowed himself the verbal. The wrath, Jonathan Edwards thundered. The wrath of God is like great waters that are dammed for the present, they increase more and more, and rise higher and higher till an outlet is given, and the longer the stream is stopped, the more rapid and mighty is its course when once it is let loose. 'Tis true, that judgment against your evil works has not been executed hitherto. The floods of God's vengeance have been withheld. But your guilt in the meantime is constantly increasing, and you are every day treasuring up more wrath. The waters are continually rising, and waxing more and more mighty, and there is nothing but the mere pleasure of God that holds the waters back that are unwilling to be stopped, and press hard to go forward. If God should only withdraw his hand from the floodgate, it would immediately fly open, and the fiery floods of the fierceness of the wrath of God would rush forth with inconceivable fury, and would come upon you with omnipotent power. And if your strength were 10,000 times greater than it is, yea 10,000 times greater than the strength of the stoutest, sturdiest devil in hell, it would be nothing to withstand or endure it. Having threatened with the element water, Pastor Jonathan next turns to the image of fire. The God that holds you over the pit of hell, much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you, and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire. He looks upon you as worthy of nothing else but to be cast into the fire. He is of purer eyes than to bear to have you in his sight. You are 10,000 times so abominable in his eyes as the most hateful venomous serpent is in ours. You have offended him infinitely more than ever a stubborn rebel did his prince, and yet 'tis nothing but his hand that holds you from falling into the fire every moment. O sinner! You hang by a slender thread, with the flames of divine wrath flashing about it, and ready every moment to singe it, and burn it asunder. And you have no interest in any mediator, and nothing to lay hold of to save yourself, nothing to keep off the flames of wrath, nothing of your own, nothing that you ever have done, nothing that you can do, to induce God to spare you one moment. But now, at last, the great resolving image of the second birth, only for a moment, however. Thus are all you that never passed under a great change of heart, by the mighty power of the Spirit of God upon your souls, all that were never born again, and made new creatures, and raised from being dead in sin, to a state of new, and before altogether unexperienced light and life. However you may have reformed your life in many things, and may have had religious affections, and may keep up a form of religion in your families and closets, and in the house of God, and may be strict in it. You are thus in the hands of an angry God. 'Tis nothing but his mere pleasure that keeps you from being this moment swallowed up in everlasting destruction. 42. Figure 27. Creation, detail, fresco, Italy, A.D. 1508 to 1512. God's mere pleasure, which defends the sinner from the arrow, the flood, and the flames, is termed in the traditional vocabulary of Christianity God's mercy, and the mighty power of the Spirit of God, by which the heart is changed, that is God's grace. In most mythologies, the images of mercy and grace are rendered as vividly as those of justice and wrath, so that a balance is maintained, and the heart is buoyed rather than scourged along its way. Fear not, says the hand gesture of the god Shiva, as he dances before his devotee the dance of the universal destruction. Fear not, for all rests well in God. The forms that come and go, and of which your body is but one, are the flashes of my dancing limbs. Know me in all, and of what shall you be afraid? The magic of the sacraments, made effective through the passion of Jesus Christ, or by virtue of the meditations of the Buddha. The protective power of primitive amulets and charms, and the supernatural helpers of the myths and fairy tales of the world, are mankind's assurances that the arrow, the flames, and the flood are not as brutal as they seem. Figure 28. Shiva, Lord of the Cosmic Dance, cast bronze, India, circa 10th-12th century A.D. The symbolism of this eloquent image has been well expounded by Ananda K. Kumaraswamy, 43, and by Heinrich Zimmer, 44. Briefly, the extended right hand holds the drum, the beat of which is the beat of time, time being the first principle of creation. The extended left holds the flame, which is the flame of the destruction of the created world. The second right hand is held in the gesture of fear not, while the second left, pointing to the lifted left foot, is held in a position symbolizing elephant. The elephant is the breaker of the way through the jungle of the world, i.e., the divine guide. The right foot is planted on the back of a dwarf, the demon, non-knowing, which signifies the passage of souls from God into matter, but the left is lifted, showing the release of the soul. The left is the foot to which the elephant hand is pointing and supplies the reason for the assurance, fear not. The god's head is balanced, serene and still, in the midst of the dynamism of creation and destruction, which is symbolized by the rocking arms and the rhythm of the slowly stamping right heel. This means that at the center all is still. Shiva's right earring is a man's, his left, woman's. For the god includes and is beyond the pairs of opposites. Shiva's facial expression is neither sorrowful nor joyous, but is the visage of the unmoved mover, beyond, yet present within, the world's bliss and pain. The wildly streaming locks represent the long untended hair of the Indian yogi, now flying in the dance of life. For the presence known in the joys and sorrows of life, and that found through withdrawn meditation, are but two aspects of the same, universal, non-dual, being consciousness bliss. Sat Cit Ananda. Shiva's bracelets, armbands, ankle rings, and Brahmanical thread, 45, are living serpents. This means that he is made beautiful by the serpent power, the mysterious creative energy of God, which is the material and the formal cause of his own self-manifestation in, and as, the universe with all its beings. In Shiva's hair may be seen a skull, symbolic of death, the forehead ornament of the Lord of Destruction, as well as a crescent moon, symbolic of birth and increase, which are his other boons to the world. Also, there is in his hair the flower of a datura, from which plant an intoxicant is prepared. Compare the wine of Dionysus and the wine of the Mass. A little image of the goddess Ganges is hidden in his locks, for it is he who receives on his head the impact of the descent of the divine Ganges from heaven, letting the life and salvation bestowing waters then flow gently to the earth for the physical and spiritual refreshment of mankind. The dance posture of the god may be visualized as the symbolic syllable aum, or, which is the verbal equivalent of the four states of consciousness and their fields of experience. A. Waking consciousness. U. Dream consciousness. M. Dreamless sleep. The silence around the sacred syllable is the unmanifest transcendent. 46. The god is thus within the worshipper as well as without. Such a figure illustrates the function and value of a graven image, and shows why long sermons are unnecessary among idol worshippers. The devotee is permitted to soak in the meaning of the divine symbol in deep silence and in his own good time. Furthermore, just as the god wears armbands and ankle rings, so does the devotee, and these mean what the gods mean. They are made of gold instead of serpents, gold, the metal that does not corrode, symbolizing immortality. I.e., immortality is the mysterious creative energy of God, which is the beauty of the body. Many other details of life and local custom are similarly duplicated, interpreted, and thus validated in the details of the anthropomorphic idols. In this way, the whole of life is made into a support for meditation. One lives in the midst of a silent sermon all the time. For the ogre aspect of the father is a reflex of the victim's own ego, derived from the sensational nursery scene that has been left behind, but projected before, and the fixating idolatry of that pedagogical non-thing is itself the fault that keeps one steeped in a sense of sin, sealing the potentially adult spirit from a better balanced, more realistic view of the father, and therewith of the world. Atonement, at one ment, consists in no more than the abandonment of that self-generated double monster. The dragon thought to be God, superego, asterisk, and the dragon thought to be sin, repressed id. But this requires an abandonment of the attachment to ego itself, and that is what is difficult. One must have a faith that the Father is merciful and then a reliance on that mercy. Therewith, the center of belief is transferred outside of the bedeviling god's tight scaly ring, and the dreadful ogres dissolve. It is in this ordeal that the hero may derive hope and assurance from the helpful female figure, by whose magic, pollen charms or power of intercession, he is protected through all the frightening experiences of the father's ego-shattering initiation. For if it is impossible to trust the terrifying father face, then one's faith must be centered elsewhere, Spider-Woman, Blessed Mother, and with that reliance for support, one endures the crisis, only to find, in the end, that the father and mother reflect each other, and are in essence the same. When the twin warriors of the Navajo, having departed from Spider-Woman with her advice and protective charms, had made their perilous way between the rocks that crush, through the reeds that cut to pieces, and the cactus plants that tear to pieces, and then across the boiling sands, they came at last to the house of the sun, their father. The door was guarded by two bears. These arose and growled, but the words that Spider-Woman had taught the boys made the animals crouch down again. After the bears, there threatened a pair of serpents, then wines, then lightnings, the guardians of the ultimate threshold. All were readily appeased, however, with the words of the prayer. Built of turquoise, the house of the sun was great and square, and it stood on the shore of a mighty water. The boys entered it, and they beheld a woman sitting in the west, 2 handsome young men in the south, 2 handsome young women in the north. The young women stood up without a word, wrapped the newcomers in 4 sky coverings, and placed them on a shelf. The boys lay quietly. Presently a rattle hanging over the door shook 4 times, and one of the young women said, "Our father is coming." 4 symbolical colors, representing the points of the compass, play a prominent role in Navajo iconography and cult. They are white, blue, yellow, and black, signifying, respectively, east, south, west, and north. These correspond to the red, white, green, and black on the hat of the African trickster divinity Edshu. For the house of the father, like the father himself, symbolizes the center. The twin heroes are tested against the symbols of the 4 directions, to discover whether they partake of the faults and limitations of any one of the quarters. The bearer of the sun strode into his home, removed the sun from his back, and hung it on a peg on the west wall of the room, where it shook and clanged for some time, going, "TLA, TLA, TLA, TLA." He turned to the older woman and demanded angrily, "Who are those 2 that entered here today?" But the woman did not reply. The young people looked at one another. The bearer of the sun put his question angrily 4 times before the woman said to him at last, "It would be well for you not to say too much. 2 young men came hither today, seeking their father. You have told me that you pay no visits when you go abroad, and that you have met no woman but me. Whose sons, then, are these?" She pointed to the bundle on the shelf, and the children smiled significantly at one another. The bearer of the sun took the bundle from the shelf, unrolled the 4 robes, the robes of dawn, blue sky, yellow evening light, and darkness, and the boys fell out on the floor. He immediately seized them. Fiercely, he flung them at some great sharp spikes of white shell that stood in the east. The boys tightly clutched their life feathers and bounded back. The man hurled them, equally, at spikes of turquoise in the south, Haliotis in the west, and black rock in the north. The boys always clutched their life feathers tightly and came bounding back. "I wish it were indeed true," said the sun, "that they were my children." The terrible father essayed then to steam the boys to death in an overheated sweat lodge. They were aided by the winds, who provided a protected retreat within the lodge in which to hide. "Yes, these are my children," said the sun when they emerged, but that was only a ruse, for he was still planning to trick them. The final ordeal was a smoking pipe filled with poison. A spiny caterpillar warned the boys and gave them something to put into their mouths. They smoked the pipe without harm, passing it back and forth to one another till it was finished. They even said it tasted sweet. The sun was proud. He was completely satisfied. "Now, my children," he asked, "what is it you want from me? Why do you seek me?" The twin heroes had won the full confidence of the sun, their father. 47. The need for great care on the part of the father, admitting to his house only those who have been thoroughly tested, is illustrated by the unhappy exploit of the lad Phaethon, described in a famous tale of the Greeks. Born of a virgin in Ethiopia and taunted by his playmates to search the question of his father, he set off across Persia and India to find the palace of the sun, for his mother had told him that his father was Phoebus, the god who drove the solar chariot. The palace of the sun stood high on lofty columns, bright with glittering gold and bronze that shone like fire. Gleaming ivory crowned the gables above, the double folding doors were radiant with burnished silver. And the workmanship was more beautiful than the materials. Climbing the steep path, Phaethon arrived beneath the roof. And he discovered Phoebus sitting on an emerald throne, surrounded by the hours and the seasons, and by day, month, year, and century. The bold youngster had to halt at the threshold, his mortal eyes unable to bear the light, but the father gently spoke to him across the hall. "Why have you come?" the father asked. "What do you seek, O Phaethon? A son no father need deny." The lad respectfully replied, "O my father, if thou grantest me the right to use that name. Phoebus, light of the entire world, grant me a proof, my father, by which all may know me for thy true son." The great god set his glittering crown aside and bade the boy approach. He gathered him into his arms. Then he promised, sealing the promise with a binding oath, that any proof the lad desired would be granted. What Phaethon desired was his father's chariot and the right to drive the winged horses for a day. "Such a request," said the father, "proves my promise to have been rashly made." He put the boy a little away from him and sought to dissuade him from the demand. "In your ignorance," said he, "you are asking for more than can be granted even to the gods. Each of the gods may do as he will, and yet none, save myself, has the power to take his place in my chariot of fire. No, not even Zeus." Phoebus reasoned. Phaethon was adamant. Unable to retract the oath, the father delayed as long as time would allow, but was finally forced to conduct his stubborn son to the prodigious chariot. Its axle of gold and the pole of gold, its wheels with golden tires and a ring of silver spokes. The yoke was set with chrysolites and jewels. The hours were already leading the 4 horses from their lofty stalls, breathing fire and filled with ambrosial food. They put upon them the clanking bridles, the great animals pawed at the bars. Phoebus anointed Phaethon's face with an ointment to protect it against the flames and then placed on his head the radiant crown. If, at least, you can obey your father's warnings, the divinity advised. Spare the lash and hold tightly to the reins. The horses go fast enough of themselves. And do not follow the straight road directly through the 5 zones of heaven, but turn off at the fork to the left. The tracks of my wheels you will clearly see. Furthermore, so that the sky and earth may have equal heat, be careful to go neither too high nor too low. For if you go too high you will burn up the skies, and if you go too low ignite the earth. In the middle is the safest path. But hurry. While I am speaking, dewy night has reached her goal on the western shore. We are summoned. Behold, the dawn is glowing. Boy, may fortune aid and conduct you better than you can guide yourself. Here, grasp the reins. Tethys, the goddess of the sea, had dropped the bars, and the horses, with a jolt, abruptly started, cleaving with their feet the clouds, beating the air with their wings, outrunning all the winds that were rising from the same eastern quarter. Immediately, the chariot was so light without its accustomed weight, the car began to rock about like a ship tossing without ballast on the waves. The driver, panic-stricken, forgot the reins, and knew nothing of the road. Wildly mounting, the team grazed the heights of the sky and startled the remotest constellations. The Great and Little Bear were scorched. The serpent lying curled about the polar stars grew warm, and with the heat grew dangerously fierce. Boötes took flight, encumbered with his plow. The scorpion struck with his tail. Figure 29. The Fall of Phaethon, ink on parchment, Italy, A.D. 1533. The chariot, having roared for some time through unknown regions of the air, knocking against the stars, next plunged down crazily to the clouds just above the ground. And the moon beheld, in amazement, her brother's horses running below her own. The clouds evaporated, the earth burst into flame, mountains blazed, cities perished with their walls, nations were reduced to ashes. That was the time the peoples of Ethiopia became black, for the blood was drawn to the surface of their bodies by the heat. Libya became a desert. The Nile fled in terror to the ends of the earth and hid its head, and it is hidden yet. Mother Earth, shielding her scorched brow with her hand, choking with hot smoke, lifted her great voice and called upon Jove, the father of all things, to save his world. Look around, she cried at him. The heavens are a smoke from pole to pole. Great Jove, if the sea perish, and the land, and all the realms of the sky, then we are back again in the chaos of the beginning. Take thought for the safety of our universe. Save from the flames whatever yet remains. Jove, the Almighty Father, hastily summoned the gods to witness that unless some measure were quickly taken all was lost. Thereupon he hurried to the zenith, took a thunderbolt in his right hand, and flung it from beside his ear. The car shattered, the horses, terrified, broke loose. Phaethon, fire raging in his hair, descended like a falling star. And the river Po received his burning frame. The naiads of that land consigned his body to a tomb, whereupon this epitaph. Here Phaethon lies. In Phoebus' car he fared. And though he greatly failed, more greatly dared. 48. This tale of indulgent parenthood illustrates the antique idea that when the roles of life are assumed by the improperly initiated, chaos supervenes. When the child outgrows the popular idol of the mother breast and turns to face the world of specialized adult action, it passes, spiritually, into the sphere of the father, who becomes, for his son, the sign of the future task, and for his daughter, of the future husband. Whether he knows it or not, and no matter what his position in society, the father is the initiating priest through whom the young being passes on into the larger world. And just as, formerly, the mother represented the good and evil, so now does he, but with this complication, that there is a new element of rivalry in the picture. The son against the father for the mastery of the universe, and the daughter against the mother to be the mastered world. The traditional idea of initiation combines an introduction of the candidate into the techniques, duties, and prerogatives of his vocation with a radical readjustment of his emotional relationship to the parental images. The mystagogue, father or father substitute, is to entrust the symbols of office only to a son who has been effectually purged of all inappropriate infantile cathexes, for whom the just and personal exercise of the powers will not be rendered impossible by unconscious, or perhaps even conscious and rationalized, motives of self-aggrandizement, personal preference, or resentment. Ideally, the invested one has been divested of his mere humanity and is representative of an impersonal cosmic force. He is the twice born, he has become himself the father. And he is competent, consequently, now to enact himself the role of the initiator, the guide, the sun-door, through whom one may pass from the infantile illusions of good and evil, to an experience of the majesty of cosmic law, purged of hope and fear, and at peace in the understanding of the revelation of being. Once I dreamed, declared a little boy, that I was captured by cannonballs, sick. They all began to jump and yell. I was surprised to see myself in my own parlor. There was a fire, and a kettle was over it full of boiling water. They threw me into it, and once in a while the cook used to come over and stick a fork into me to see if I was cooked. Then he took me out and gave me to the chief, who was just going to bite me when I woke up. 49. I dreamed that I was at table with my wife, states a civilized gentleman. During the course of the meal I reached over and took our second child, a baby, and in a matter-of-fact fashion proceeded to put him into a green soup bowl, full of hot water or some hot liquid, for he came out cooked thoroughly, like chicken fricassee. I laid the viand on a breadboard at the table and cut it up with my knife. When we had eaten all of it except a small part like a chicken gizzard, I looked up, worried, to my wife and asked her, "Are you sure you wanted me to do this? Did you intend to have him for supper?" She answered, with a domestic frown, "After he was so well cooked, there was nothing else to do." I was just about to finish the last piece, when I woke up. 50. This archetypal nightmare of the ogre father is made actual in the ordeals of primitive initiation. The boys of the Australian Murjan tribe, as we have seen, are first frightened and sent running to their mothers. The great father snake is calling for their foreskins. This places the women in the role of protectresses. A prodigious horn is blown, named Yirlungur, which is supposed to be the call of the great father snake, who has emerged from his hole. When the men come for the boys, the women grab up spears and pretend not only to fight but also to wail and cry, because the little fellows are going to be taken away and eaten. The men's triangular dancing ground is the body of the great father snake. There the boys are shown, during many nights, numerous dances symbolical of the various totem ancestors, and are taught the myths that explain the existing order of the world. Also, they are sent on a long journey to neighboring and distant clans, imitative of the mythological wanderings of the phallic ancestors. 51. In this way, within the great father snake as it were, they are introduced to an interesting new object world that compensates them for their loss of the mother, and the male phallus, instead of the female breast, is made the central point, axis mundi, of the imagination. The culminating instruction of the long series of rites is the release of the boy's own hero penis from the protection of its foreskin, through the frightening and painful attack upon it of the circumciser. The father, i.e., circumciser, is the one who separates the child from the mother, writes Dr. Roheim. What is cut off the boy is really the mother. The glands in the foreskin is the child in the mother. 52. It is interesting to note the continuance to this day of the rite of circumcision in the Hebrew and Mohammedan cults, where the feminine element has been scrupulously purged from the official, strictly monotheistic mythology. God forgiveth not the sin of joining other gods with him, we read in the Quran. The pagans, leaving Allah, call but upon female deities. 53. Among the Arunta, for example, the sound of the bull roars is heard from all sides when the moment has arrived for this decisive break from the past. It is night, and in the weird light of the fire suddenly appear the circumciser and his assistant. The noise of the bull roars is the voice of the great demon of the ceremony, and the pair of operators are its apparition. With their beards thrust into their mouths, signifying anger, their legs widely extended, and their arms stretched forward, the two men stand perfectly still, the actual operator in front, holding in his right hand the small flint knife with which the operation is to be conducted, and his assistant pressing close up behind him, so that the two bodies are in contact with each other. Then a man approaches through the firelight, balancing a shield on his head and at the same time snapping the thumb and first finger of each hand. The bull roars are making a tremendous din, which can be heard by the women and children in their distant camp. The man with the shield on his head goes down on one knee just a little in front of the operator, and immediately one of the boys is lifted from the ground by a number of his uncles, who carry him feet foremost and place him on the shield, while in deep, loud tones a chant is thundered forth by all the men. The operation is swiftly performed, the fearsome figures retire immediately from the lighted area, and the boy, in a more or less dazed condition, is attended to, and congratulated by the men to whose estate he has now just arrived. "You have done well," they say, "you did not cry out." 54. The native Australian mythologies teach that the first initiation rites were carried out in such a way that all the young men were killed. 55. The ritual is thus shown to be, among other things, a dramatized expression of the Oedipal aggression of the elder generation, and the circumcision, a mitigated castration. 56. But the rites provide also for the cannibal, patricidal impulse of the younger, rising group of males, and at the same time reveal the benign self-giving aspect of the archetypal father. For during the long period of symbolical instruction, there is a time when the initiates are forced to live only on the fresh-drawn blood of the older men. The natives, we are told, are particularly interested in the Christian communion rite, and having heard about it from missionaries they compare it to the blood-drinking rituals of their own. 57. In the evening the men come and take their places according to tribal precedents, the boy lying with his head on his father's thighs. He must make no movement or he will die. The father blindfolds him with his hands because if the boy should witness the following proceedings it is believed that his father and mother will both die. The wooden vessel or bark vessel is placed near one of the boy's mother's brothers, who, having tied his arm lightly, pierces the upper part with a nosebone and holds the arm over the vessel until a certain amount of blood has been taken. The man next to him pierces his arm, and so on, until the vessel is filled. It may hold 2 quarts or so. The boy takes a long draught of the blood. Should his stomach rebel, the father holds his throat to prevent his ejecting the blood, because if it happens his father, mother, sisters, and brothers would all die. The remainder of the blood is thrown over him. From this time on, sometimes for a whole moon, the boy is allowed no other food than human blood, Yaminga, the mythical ancestor, having made this law. Sometimes the blood is dried in the vessel and then the guardian cuts it in sections with his nosebone, and it is eaten by the boy, the 2 end sections first. The sections must be regularly divided or the boy will die. 58. In one recorded case, 2 of the boys looked up when they were not supposed to. Then the old men went forward, each with a stone knife in hand. Stooping over the two boys, they opened veins in each. Out flowed the blood, and the other men all raised a death cry. The boys were lifeless. The old weary nuns, medicine men, dipping their stone knives in the blood, touched with them the lips of all present. The bodies of the burra victims were cooked. Each man who had been to 5 burras ate a piece of this flesh. No others were allowed to see this done. 61. Frequently the men who give their blood faint and remain in a state of coma for an hour or more because of exhaustion. 59. In former times, writes another observer, this blood, drunk ceremonially by the novices, was obtained from a man who was killed for the purpose, and portions of his body were eaten. 60. Here, comments Dr. Roheim, we come as near to a ritual representation of the killing and eating of the primal father as we can ever get. There can be no doubt that no matter how unilluminated the stark naked Australian savages may seem to us, their symbolical ceremonials represent a survival into modern times of an incredibly old system of spiritual instruction, the far-flung evidences of which are to be found not only in all the lands and islands bordering the Indian Ocean, but also among the remains of the archaic centers of what we tend to regard as our own very special brand of civilization. Just how much the old men know, it is difficult to judge from the published accounts of our Occidental observers. But it can be seen from a comparison of the figures of Australian ritual with those familiar to us from higher cultures, that the great themes, the ageless archetypes, and their operation upon the soul remain the same. For an astounding revelation of the survival in contemporary Melanesia of a symbolic system essentially identical with that of the Egypto-Babylonian, Trojan-Cretan, labyrinth complex, of the 2nd millennium B.C. See John Layard's Stone Men of Malekula, 62. W.F.J. Knight has discussed the evident relationship of the Malekulan, journey of the soul to the underworld, with the classical descent of Aeneas, and the Babylonian of Gilgamesh, 63. While W.J. Perry thought he could recognize evidences of this culture continuity running all the way from Egypt and Sumer out through the oceanic area to North America. 64. Many scholars have pointed out the close correspondences between the details of the classical Greek and primitive Australian rites of initiation. 65. It is still uncertain by what means and in what eras the mythological and cultural patterns of the various archaic civilizations may have been disseminated to the farthest corners of the earth. Yet it can be stated categorically that few, if any, of the so-called primitive cultures studied by our anthropologists represent autochthonous growths. They are, rather, local adaptations, provincial degenerations, and immensely old fossilizations of folkways that were developed in very different lands, often under much less simple circumstances, and by other races. 66. Come, O Dithyrambos, enter this my male womb. 67. This cry of Zeus, the thunder hurler, to the child, his son, Dionysus, sounds the leitmotif of the Greek mysteries of the initiatory's second birth. And bull voices roar thereto from somewhere out of the unseen, fearful semblances, and from a drum an image as it were of thunder underground is borne on the air heavy with dread. 68. The word, Dithyrambos, itself, as an epithet of the killed and resurrected Dionysus, was understood by the Greeks to signify him of the double door, him who had survived the awesome miracle of the second birth. And we know that the choral songs, dithyrambs, and dark, blood-reeking rites in celebration of the god, associated with the renewal of vegetation, the renewal of the moon, the renewal of the sun, the renewal of the soul, and solemnized at the season of the resurrection of the year god, represent the ritual beginnings of the Attic tragedy. Throughout the ancient world such myths and rites abounded, the deaths and resurrections of Tammuz, Adonis, Mithra, Verbius, Attis, and Osiris, and of their various animal representatives, goats and sheep, bulls, pigs, horses, fish, and birds, are known to every student of comparative religion. The popular carnival games of the Whitsuntide Louts, Green George, John Barleycorns, and Kostrubonkos, carrying out winter, bringing in summer, and killing of the Christmas wren have continued the tradition, in a mood of frolic, into our contemporary calendar. 69. And through the Christian Church, in the mythology of the fall and redemption, crucifixion, and resurrection, the second birth of baptism, the initiatory blow on the cheek at confirmation, the symbolical eating of the flesh and drinking of the blood, solemnly, and sometimes effectively, we are united to those immortal images of initiatory might, through the sacramental operation of which man, since the beginning of his day on earth, has dispelled the terrors of his phenomenality and won through to the all-transfiguring vision of a mortal being. For if the blood of bulls and of goats, and the ashes of an heifer sprinkling the unclean, sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to God, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living God? 70. Figure 30. The Sorcerer, rock engraving with black paint fill-in, Paleolithic, France, circa 10,000 B.C. There is a folktale told by the Basumba of East Africa, of a man whose dead father appeared to him, driving the cattle of death, and conducted him along a path that went into the ground, as into a vast burrow. They came to an extensive area where there were some people. The father hid the son and went off to sleep. The great chief, Death, appeared the next morning. One side of him was beautiful, but the other side was rotten, maggots were dropping to the ground. His attendants were gathering the maggots. The attendants washed the sores, and when they had finished, Death said, "The one born today, If he goes trading, he will be robbed. The woman who conceives today, she will die with the child conceived. The man who cultivates today, his crops have perished. The one who is to go into the jungle has been eaten by the lion. Death thus pronounced the universal curse and returned to rest. But the following morning, when he appeared, his attendants washed and perfumed the beautiful side, massaging it with oil. When they had finished, Death pronounced the blessing, the one born today, may he become wealthy. May the woman who conceives today give birth to a child who will live to be old. The one born today, let him go into the market, may he strike good bargains, may he trade with the blind. The man who is to enter the jungle, may he kill game, may he discover even elephants. Because today I pronounce the benediction. The father then said to the son, if you had arrived today, many things would have come into your possession. But now it is clear that poverty has been ordained for you. Tomorrow you had better go. And the son returned to his home. 71. Figure 31. The Universal Father, Viracocha, weeping, bronze, pre-Incan, Argentina, circa A.D. 650 to 750. The sun in the underworld, Lord of the dead, is the other side of the same radiant king who rules and gives the day. For, who is it that sustains you from the sky and from the earth? And who is it that brings out the living from the dead and the dead from the living? And who is it that rules and regulates all affairs? 72. We recall the Wachaga tale of the very poor man, Kayazimba, who was transported by a crone to the zenith, where the sun rests at noon. 73. There the great chief bestowed on him prosperity. And we recall the trickster god Edshu, described in a tale from the other coast of Africa. 74. Spreading strife was his greatest joy. These are differing views of the same dreadful providence. In him are contained and from him proceed the contradictions, good and evil, death and life, pain and pleasure, boons and deprivation. As the person of the sun door, he is the fountainhead of all the pairs of opposites. With him are the keys of the unseen. In the end, unto him will be your return. Then will he show you the truth of all that ye did. 75. The mystery of the apparently self-contradictory Father is rendered tellingly in the figure of a great divinity of prehistoric Peru, named Viracocha. His tiara is the sun. He grasps a thunderbolt in either hand, and from his eyes descend, in the form of tears, the rains that refresh the life of the valleys of the world. Viracocha is the universal God, the creator of all things, and yet, in the legends of his appearances upon the earth, he is shown wandering as a beggar, in rags and reviled. One is reminded of the Gospel of Mary and Joseph at the indoors of Bethlehem, 76, and of the classical story of the begging of Jove and Mercury at the home of Baucis and Philemon, 77. One is reminded also of the unrecognized Edshu. This is a theme frequently encountered in mythology. Its sense is caught in the words of the Quran. Whithersoever ye turn, there is the presence of Allah, 78. Though he is hidden in all things, say the Hindus, that soul shines not forth, yet he is seen by subtle seers with superior, subtle intellect, 79. Split the stick, runs a Gnostic aphorism, and there is Jesus, 80. Viracocha, therefore, in this manner of manifesting his ubiquity, participates in the character of the highest of the universal gods. Furthermore, his synthesis of sun god and storm god is familiar. We know it through the Hebrew mythology of Yahweh, in whom the traits of two gods are united. Yahweh, a storm god, and El, a solar. It is apparent in the Navajo personification of the father of the twin warriors. It is obvious in the character of Zeus, as well as in the thunderbolt and halo of certain forms of the Buddha image. The meaning is that the grace that pours into the universe through the sun door is the same as the energy of the bolt that annihilates and is itself indestructible. The delusion-shattering light of the imperishable is the same as the light that creates. Or again, in terms of a secondary polarity of nature, the fire blazing in the sun glows also in the fertilizing storm. The energy behind the elemental pair of opposites, fire and water, is one and the same. But the most extraordinary and profoundly moving of the traits of Viracocha, this nobly conceived Peruvian rendition of the universal God, is the detail that is peculiarly his own, namely that of the tears. The living waters are the tears of God. Herewith the world discrediting insight of the monk. All life is sorrowful, as combined with the world begetting affirmative of the Father. Life must be. In full awareness of the life anguish of the creatures of his hand, in full consciousness of the roaring wilderness of pains, the brain-splitting fires of the deluded, self-ravaging, lustful, angry universe of his creation, this divinity acquiesces in the deed of supplying life to life. To withhold the seminal waters would be to annihilate, yet to give them forth is to create this world that we know. For the essence of time is flux, dissolution of the momentarily existent, and the essence of life is time. In his mercy, in his love for the forms of time, this demiurgic man of men yields countenance to the sea of pangs. But in his full awareness of what he is doing, the seminal waters of the life that he gives are the tears of his eyes. The paradox of creation, the coming of the forms of time out of eternity, is the germinal secret of the Father. It can never be quite explained. Therefore, in every system of theology there is an umbilical point, an Achilles tendon which the finger of mother life has touched, and where the possibility of perfect knowledge has been impaired. The problem of the hero is to pierce himself, and therewith his world, precisely through that point, to shatter and annihilate that key knot of his limited existence. The problem of the hero going to meet the Father is to open his soul beyond terror to such a degree that he will be ripe to understand how the sickening and insane tragedies of this vast and ruthless cosmos are completely validated in the majesty of being. The hero transcends life with its peculiar blind spot and for a moment rises to a glimpse of the source. He beholds the face of the Father, understands, and the two are atoned. In the biblical story of Job, the Lord makes no attempt to justify in human or any other terms the ill pay meted out to his virtuous servant, a simple and upright man, and fearing God, and avoiding evil. Nor was it for any sins of their own that Job's servants were slain by the Chaldean troops, his sons and daughters crushed by a collapsing roof. When his friends arrive to console him, they declare, with a pious faith in God's justice, that Job must have done some evil to have deserved to be so frightfully afflicted. But the honest, courageous, horizon-searching sufferer insists that his deeds have been good, whereupon the comforter, Elihu, charges him with blasphemy, as naming himself more just than God. When the Lord himself answers Job out of the whirlwind, he makes no attempt to vindicate his work in ethical terms, but only magnifies his presence, bidding Job do likewise on earth in human emulation of the way of heaven. Gird up thy loins now like a man, I will demand of thee, and declare thou unto me. Wilt thou also disannul my judgment? Wilt thou condemn me, that thou mayest be righteous? Hast thou an arm like God, or canst thou thunder with a voice like him? Deck thyself now with majesty and excellency, and array thyself with glory and beauty. Cast abroad the rage of thy wrath, and behold every one that is proud and abase him. Look on every one that is proud, and bring him low, and tread down the wicked in their place. Hide them in the dust together, and bind their faces in secret. Then I will also confess unto thee that thine own hand can save thee. 81. There is no word of explanation, no mention of the dubious wager with Satan described in chapter 1 of the book of Job. Only a thunder and lightning demonstration of the fact of facts, namely that man cannot measure the will of God, which derives from a sender beyond the range of human categories. Categories, indeed, are totally shattered by the Almighty of the book of Job, and remain shattered to the last. Nevertheless, to Job himself the revelation appears to have made soul-satisfying sense. He was a hero who, by his courage in the fiery furnace, his unreadiness to break down and grovel before a popular conception of the character of the All-Highest, had proven himself capable of facing a greater revelation than the one that satisfied his friends. We cannot interpret his words of the last chapter as those of a man merely intimidated. They are the words of one who has seen something surpassing anything that has been said by way of justification. I have heard of thee by the hearing of the ear, but now mine eye seeth thee. Wherefore I abhor myself, and repent in dust and ashes. 82. The pious comforters are humbled. Job is rewarded with a fresh house, fresh servants, and fresh daughters and sons. After this lived Job 140 years, and saw his sons, and his sons' sons, even 4 generations. So Job died, being old and full of days. 83. For the son who has grown really to know the Father, the agonies of the ordeal are readily borne. The world is no longer a vale of tears but a bliss-yielding, perpetual manifestation of the presence. Contrast with the wrath of the angry God known to Jonathan Edwards and his flock, the following tender lyric from the miserable Eastern European ghettos of that same century. O, Lord of the universe! I will sing thee a song. Where canst thou be found? And where canst thou not be found? Where I pass, there art thou. Where I remain, there, too, thou art. Thou, and only thou. Doth it go well? 'Tis thanks to thee. Doth it go ill? Ah, 'tis also thanks to thee. Thou art, thou hast been, and thou wilt be. Thou didst reign, thou reignest, and thou wilt reign. Thine is heaven, thine is earth. Thou fillest the high regions. And thou fillest the low regions. Wheresoever I turn, thou, O thou, art there. 84. Figure 32. Bodhisattva, Temple Banner, Tibet, 19th century A.D. 5. Apotheosis. One of the most powerful and beloved of the bodhisattvas of the Mahayana Buddhism of Tibet, China, and Japan is the lotus bearer, Avalokitesvara, the Lord looking down in pity, so called because he regards with compassion all sentient creatures suffering the evils of existence. To him goes the millionfold repeated prayer of the prayer wheels and temple gongs of Tibet. Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel is in the lotus. To him go perhaps more prayers per minute than to any single divinity known to man. For when, during his final life on earth as a human being, he shattered for himself the bounds of the last threshold, which moment opened to him the timelessness of the void beyond the frustrating mirage enigmas of the named and bounded cosmos, he paused. He made a vow that before entering the void he would bring all creatures without exception to enlightenment, and since then he has permeated the whole texture of existence with the divine grace of his assisting presence, so that the least prayer addressed to him, throughout the vast spiritual empire of the Buddha, is graciously heard. Under differing forms he traverses the 10,000 worlds, and appears in the hour of need and prayer. He reveals himself in human form with 2 arms, in superhuman forms with 4 arms, or with 6, or 12, or 1,000, and he holds in one of his left hands the lotus of the world. Hinayana or Theravada Buddhism, the Buddhism surviving in Ceylon, Burma, and Thailand, reveres the Buddha as a human hero, a supreme saint and sage. Mahayana Buddhism, on the other hand, The Buddhism of the North regards the enlightened one as a world savior, an incarnation of the universal principle of enlightenment. A bodhisattva is a personage on the point of Buddhahood, according to the Hinayana view, an adept who will become a Buddha in a subsequent reincarnation. According to the Mahayana view, as the following paragraphs will show, a type of world savior, representing particularly the universal principle of compassion. The word bodhisattva, Sanskrit, means, whose being or essence is enlightenment. Mahayana Buddhism has developed a pantheon of many bodhisattvas and many past and future Buddhas. These all inflect the manifested powers of the transcendent, one and only Adi Buddha, primal Buddha, 87, who is the highest conceivable source and ultimate boundary of all being, suspended in the void of non-being like a wonderful bubble. Like the Buddha himself, this godlike being is a pattern of the divine state to which the human hero attains who has gone beyond the last terrors of ignorance. When the envelopment of consciousness has been annihilated, then he becomes free of all fear, beyond the reach of change, 85. This is the release potential within us all, and which anyone can attain, through herohood. For, as we read, all things are Buddha things, 86. Or again, and this is the other way of making the same statement, all beings are without self. The world is filled and illumined by, but does not hold, the bodhisattva, he whose being is enlightenment. Rather, it is he who holds the world, the lotus. Pain and pleasure do not enclose him, he encloses them, and with profound repose. And since he is what all of us may be, his presence, his image, the mere naming of him, helps. He wears a garland of 8,000 rays, in which is seen fully reflected a state of perfect beauty. The color of his body is purple gold. His palms have the mixed color of 500 lotuses, while each fingertip has 84,000 signet marks, and each mark 84,000 colors. Each color has 84,000 rays which are soft and mild and shine over all things that exist. With these jewel hands he draws and embraces all beings. The halo surrounding his head is studded with 500 Buddhas, miraculously transformed, each attended by 500 bodhisattvas, who are attended, in turn, by numberless gods. And when he puts his feet down to the ground, the flowers of diamonds and jewels that are scattered cover everything in all directions. The color of his face is gold, while in his towering crown of gems stands a Buddha 250 miles high, 88. In China and Japan, this sublimely gentle bodhisattva is represented not only in male form, but also as female. Kuan Yin of China, Canon of Japan, the Madonna of the Far East, is precisely this benevolent regarder of the world. She will be found in every Buddhist temple of the farthest Orient. She is blessed alike to the simple and to the wise, for behind her vow there lies a profound intuition, world-redeeming, world-sustaining. The pause on the threshold of nirvana, the resolution to forego until the end of time, which never ends, immersion in the untroubled pool of eternity, represents a realization that the distinction between eternity and time is only apparent, made, perforce, by the rational mind, but dissolved in the perfect knowledge of the mind that has transcended the pairs of opposites. What is understood is that time and eternity are two aspects of the same experience whole, two planes of the same non-dual ineffable, i.e., the jewel of eternity is in the lotus of birth and death. Om Mani Padme Hum. The first wonder to be noted here is the androgynous character of the bodhisattva. Masculine Avalokitesvara, feminine Kuan Yin. Figure 33. Kuan Yin, the Avalokitesvara bodhisattva, painted wood, China, 11th-13th century A.D. Male-female gods are not uncommon in the world of myth. They emerge always with a certain mystery, for they conduct the mind beyond objective experience into a symbolic realm where duality is left behind. Awanuilona, chief god of the Pueblo of Zuni, the maker and container of all, is sometimes spoken of as he, but is actually he-she. The great original of the Chinese chronicles, the holy woman Te Yuan, combined in her person the masculine yang and the feminine yin. Yang, the light, active, masculine principle, and yin, the dark, passive, and feminine, in their interaction underlie and constitute the whole world of forms, the 10,000 things. They proceed from and together make manifest Tao, the source and law of being. Tao means road or way. Tao is the way or course of nature, destiny, cosmic order, the absolute made manifest. Tao is therefore also truth, right conduct. Yang and yin together as Tao are depicted thus, yin-yang. Tao underlies the cosmos. Tao inhabits every created thing. The Kabbalistic teachings of the medieval Jews, as well as the Gnostic Christian writings of the 2nd century, represent the Word made flesh as androgynous, which was indeed the state of Adam as he was created, before the female aspect, Eve, was removed into another form. And among the Greeks, not only Hermaphrodite, the child of Hermes and Aphrodite, 89, but Eros too, the divinity of love, the first of the gods, according to Plato, 90, were in sex both female and male. So God created man in his own image, in the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them, 91. The question may arise in the mind as to the nature of the image of God, but the answer is already given in the text and is clear enough. When the Holy One, blessed be he, created the first man, he created him androgynous, 92. The removal of the feminine into another form symbolizes the beginning of the fall from perfection into duality, and it was naturally followed by the discovery of the duality of good and evil, exile from the garden where God walks on earth, and thereupon the building of the wall of paradise, constituted of the coincidence of opposites, 93, by which man, now man and woman, is cut off from not only the vision but even the recollection of the image of God. This is the biblical version of a myth known to many lands. It represents one of the basic ways of symbolizing the mystery of creation, the devolvement of eternity into time, the breaking of the one into the two and then the many, as well as the generation of new life through the reconjunction of the two. This image stands at the beginning of the cosmogonic cycle, 94, and with equal propriety at the conclusion of the hero task, at the moment when the wall of paradise is dissolved, the divine form found and recollected, and wisdom regained, 95. Figure 34. Androgynous ancestor, carved wood, Mali, 20th century A.D. Tiresias, the blinded seer, was both male and female. His eyes were closed to the broken forms of the light world of the pairs of opposites, yet he saw in his own interior darkness the destiny of Oedipus, 96. Shiva appears united in a single body with Sakti, his spouse, he the right side, she the left, in the manifestation known as Ardhanarishvara, the half-woman lord, 97. The ancestral images of certain African and Melanesian tribes show on one being the breasts of the mother and the beard and penis of the father, 98. And in Australia, about a year following the ordeal of the circumcision, the candidate for full manhood undergoes a second ritual operation, that of subincision, a slitting open of the underside of the penis, to form a permanent cleft into the urethra. The opening is termed the penis womb. It is a symbolical male vagina. The hero has become, by virtue of the ceremonial, more than man, 99. The blood for ceremonial painting and for gluing white birds down to the body is derived by the Australian fathers from their subincision holes. They break open again the old wounds, and let it flow, 100. It symbolizes at once the menstrual blood of the vagina and the semen of the male, as well as urine, water, and male milk. The flowing shows that the old men have the source of life and nourishment within themselves, 101, i.e., that they and the inexhaustible world fountain are the same.